In this lesson, we're going to continue working on using strokes and paths to grow a complex object. So here's where we left off. You can open up 19 multi-self cross. So let's take a look at this top or upper top curly plant. And before we begin working on this, let's actually take a look at this in the context of the main comp. So let's just give this a second to load up. Second or two. Okay, here we are. And we can see on the top that this plant is half covered by the arcade machine. So what we need to do is animate this top part growing out, and we can safely ignore this bottom part, considering that the arcade machine is one of the first objects that moves into place. So let's go into our growing elements now, and since this is going to be a multi-leaf project, we're going to need to pre-comp this. Control-Shift-C. Let's grow. Okay. Now let's jump into that composition. And let's begin, of course, by drawing the main line. So I'm going to grab the pen tool, draw our main limb here. Alright, and I'm just going to choose that this limb actually goes out to this top object here. And let me hit Control-Shift-B to change my background color to something like a middle gray so I can see this mask a little easier. Okay. Okay, there we go. So now, as we have before, let's jump over to our presets, drop on a stroke reveal, and let's take a look at it. So it looks like we're going to have a few problems with the current brush size here. Not being, or being too large. Yep, being too large. And actually for this issue here, we can actually just move it to the left. So let's control left click and drag this point down and to the left. Alright, so that got rid of that issue. And now we just need to create the rest of these leaves. So let's duplicate this. Let's call this first one. We'll call it the main limb. And let's call this limb 1, so on and so forth. And as we have before, we'll just turn off the stroke, grab our pen tool using the G key, and let's draw these out. Now this one has leaves, and that's going to be a little bit of a problem. So let's actually come in here and deal with those in a different way. So as we learned in a much earlier lesson, we can do multiple strokes on a single layer and use this all masks feature. Now of course we need to be careful what masks we have. So we just need this one, and then we can draw two more that are on these leaves here, and those will draw on. Okay, so now with all masks turned on, let's take a look at this animation. Of course we'll need to turn the stroke back on and time this out, so we need it to start about frame 101. Then we can scroll forward, take a look. We've got a little overlapping problem, so we'll just control click, get this line out. And again, we got another small overlap. And then the rest of this draws on. So let's actually move this in a little, so we don't get as much revealing of the leaves initially. Okay, let's zoom out and take a look at this. And this looks a little weird. So let's actually decrease the brush size quite a bit. So let's bump that down to 3. And then we should be able to move this stroke in a little bit to stop getting those leaves actually in the final. Alright, that's looking a little bit better. Let's pull it in just slightly further. Okay, nice. Let's take a look at this. Okay, good. So all we did was sort of change how this animation happens. We reduced the brush size a little bit so that we didn't have as much overlap, and now we get a nice curling in, and then the leaves grow out themselves. Okay, so now that that's done, let's duplicate our main limb, and let's work on the next one. So the next one, we can do either this one here or this one. And let's actually use our same multi-mask technique. So we'll call this left limbs. So for the first mask, I'm just going to create one right here. And for the second mask, we'll just create one right here. And control left click to deselect. And so this will be our second mask. And control left click and our third mask. So as you can see, this multi-mask is pretty useful for sort of drawing these objects on. So let's figure out when this multi-mask should start. So it looks like right about here. Continue going forward, and we get our first mask, then the second mask, and then finally the third mask. Let's take a look at the second one and the third because we have a little bit of overlap, but it's not really noticeable. Okay, so great, that dealt with all three of those limbs, so let's just create a new layer, or we can duplicate this left limbs to do the top left limb. Alright, and again we'll turn off the stroke, remove the masks we currently have, and let's just draw out this top left curl. Okay. Hit U, make sure we set our mask, or since we're on all masks, it'll automatically work. Of course, we need to change the start timing of this, so let's pull that keyframe to the right, and let's start it right about here, maybe a little bit earlier. Okay, that's looking better. So now we get that curl out. Okay, so we need to do a little bit of modification on this curve. So this part here needs to move out a bit. This needs to move in. And on this curve here, we need to move this down just a bit because we're starting to reveal that on. As you can see, these few little white pixels here. So we're going to just pull that back just a tiny bit and pull this one out just a tiny bit. And then we'll have our animation. Alright, so now that top right limb is finished, so now we'll just duplicate this top left limb to create our top right limb. And all we'll need to do is turn off our stroke, remove our current mask, and draw out the top right limb. So as you can see, again, pretty repetitive work, but it does give us a really nice result at the end of the day, and it does work actually pretty quickly. So let's check the animation here. Alright, looking good, looking good, looking good. Alright, so let's zoom out, hit 0. Got the grow. Okay, it's looking great. So let's do the stroke test, where we turn off one stroke and see if we're missing anything. And of course, we're missing the bottom part, but since it's not visible in our main comp, we don't really need to worry about it because it will never be seen. Okay, great. So we just finished this top complex limb, so we can again exit out of this, lock it down, and move on. So let's take a look at the few we have left. So we've got these two big tendrils here. We've got an upper left swoop, and if we look in our main comp, this is actually not going to be visible. It's right behind the arcade machine, so we can simply hide that. And let's see what else we have. So we've got this arrow here, again, invisible behind the arcade machine, so we don't really need it. So we can hide that, and so now all we need to do is finish these left and right tendrils. So as you can see, this is going to be a pretty intense process, so we're going to dedicate a few lessons to finishing these off. So in the next lesson, we'll begin working on these tendrils.